The Penguins are in Sunrise tonight to take on the Florida Panthers. And for today's episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast, Pat and I are going to preview that game, plus dive into the massive injury situation that's plaguing this team right now.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes. You can follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Damp. You can follow him on Twitter at Synonym for Wet, and you can follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. Of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen/watch of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. So tonight, Pat, Penguins Cats in Sunrise. The Penguins wrap up their 3-game road trip after dropping the first 2 of this trip. And this is a pretty pivotal game for this team with the way they played in Philadelphia to start this week, with the way they laid an egg against the Lightning on Wednesday, how it looked like they quit on their head coach. This is a pretty pivotal game because you didn't see a change made on Thursday to anyone behind the bench, any trade, anything like that. Kyle Dubas continuing to be patient with this team. But if the Penguins go out there tonight and play just as bad, if not worse, than how they played on Wednesday and on Monday, I do think this weekend and into next week, you will see Dubas truly do something because the Penguins will be back home. This is a very big game.
Right. And to kind of build off that and put a little more context behind it, one, they didn't make any changes because, let's step back a little bit, take a little bit of the emotion out of it. The home and home with the Flyers, while not good, was not disastrous. You didn't go 0-for. Yes, you didn't win either game, but you got a point out of each. Like you said a couple episodes ago, you can treat it like you won one and lost the other. And the real problem is against the Lightning. They came out, they looked disinterested. They looked like a team with no answers. They looked like a team that may have quit on their head coach. And while a lot of us have been trying to figure out what's going on, why aren't they making changes? Well, here's why. Because this is the last game of a week-long road trip. They were in Philly, then they were in Tampa, now they're in Sunrise. And if they go out tonight and they play another disinterested game where you don't see a lot of effort, you don't see them pushing back. Now, we're going to get into it here in a little bit. A lot of injuries, a lot of call-ups, a lot of guys who probably aren't long-term solutions on the roster. But if you go out and you see fight, you see them, you see the effort, you see them working, and they just don't have the talent, you know what? That's part of sports. That's part of hockey. But they go out tonight, they look disinterested. They don't have any fight. There's no effort. They're off until Tuesday. And it's unless things go so catastrophically bad, you rarely fire people on a road trip in the middle of it because then you got to figure out who the replacement is. You got to get them out there. You got to figure out how you're getting the person get fired back home. And you kind of let it, especially this early. I know it's not early season anymore, but at this point in the season, you can let the road trip finish up and then make your decision once the team gets home.
And that's kind of what the Oilers did earlier this season, too, when they fired Jay Woodcroft. They had that disastrous road trip, came back home, and then they fired Woodcroft, and then they hired their new head coach, and they're playing really well right now. I'm not saying that's going to happen with the Penguins, but I understand what you're saying there. And to build off your previous point about, that lack of effort on Wednesday and if that could carry over into tonight, I really hope it doesn't, because you know what tonight means. You know what tonight is as well. It's Patric Hornqvist night, people. Patric Hornqvist, who is one of the most important players of this generation for the Penguins. He embodied what it meant to be a Penguin. And he's being honored tonight by the Panthers and the Penguins. You can't go out there and play like crap in front of him. With everything he did for the organization before he got traded, you have to go out there and play your tail off for him, especially the players who played with him when he was a member of the Penguins. I can't get that thought out of my head when I look at tonight's game.
Right. And we're going to get into what Patric Hornqvist meant to the Pittsburgh Penguins organization in the final segment of the show today. But You couple that with you are playing the defending Eastern Conference champions, a team that went to the Stanley Cup final last year and knocked off in the first round the first round, the historic Boston Bruins.
Yes.
A team that looked like they were going to sleepwalk to a Stanley Cup. They went out and knocked that team off, and they're picking up right where they left off. There is no Stanley Cup final hangover with this team. They are second in the Atlantic behind only Boston. They are the only team that they're behind in the East other than Boston is New York, the Rangers. So, and the only team ahead of both of them is Vegas at 39 points. So you look at this Florida team, they're coming off a big win against Dallas, who is one of the better teams in the National Hockey League as well. And then you look at this Florida team, a lot of talent, a lot of snarl, good goaltending, and it's a challenge. Even if, like I said, we're going to talk about the roster here in a sec for the Penguins with all the call-ups and everything, but if you want to see where you're at, this is a team to do it against. This is a team to go out and work your ass off and try to push back. And maybe you don't have the manpower to keep up with this team right now because of all the injuries and call-ups and everything, but if you go out and put out an admirable effort, keep it close, hell, maybe even sneak out a win, could turn some things around.
Yeah, honestly, man, I think this is a benchmark game for this team. If the Penguins can go out there and play a really good game against one of the three best teams in the conference, I think that could do at least a little bit of wonders for their confidence heading into next week against Arizona, Montreal. Then obviously you have the Dubas Bowl in Toronto next weekend. So that's big. But overall, man, you look at this Panthers team. As you said, they are very good. They're third in the league per money puck in expected goals, 54.3%. Their actual goals percentage, 55% overall. They're not playing typical Paul Maurice hockey. And for those that don't know what that means, that's usually low event style stuff, very defensive minded structure. The Panthers are not doing that this season. And part of the reason, they have quite a bit of talent. Sam Reinhart, 32 points in 25 games. Sasha Barkov, who is one of the most underrated centers in the league. I will continue to die on that hill. 24 points in 22 games. He needs to get more love for the Selke, and I think he probably will. Now that Patrice Bergeron is retired, Carter Verhaeghe is awesome. Evan Rodriguez is fourth on the team in points. And yes, I will continue to die on the hill that the Penguins should never have let that guy walk. He has quite a bit of talent. He's showing it down in Florida. And by the way, he was a free agent this last offseason. The Penguins, even though they traded for Erik Karlsson, they could have afforded him. I'll just put that out there. I'll always die on that hill, man.
It would have been nice to have a versatile forward like him back, a guy that can play up and down the lineup. The other thing for the Florida Panthers is they're getting goaltending too. Sergei Bobrovsky in 19 starts, 249 GAA, 910 save percentage. Anthony Stolarz, 6 games started, 234 GAA, 917 save percentage. So they're getting good goaltending. They're getting goal scoring, and they can defend. This is a really, really good hockey team. You know, not to overuse the cliche, but these aren't your daddy's Florida Panthers. This isn't a team that you put on your schedule as 2 points because you're going down to Sunrise and you're going to get a beach vacation and 2 points with it. You're going to have to earn 2 points tonight.
It used to be that way, but the Panthers are just so talented. They're also fully healthy now. Remember, they started the season, no Aaron Ekblad, no Brandon Montour. Oh, didn't matter. They were able to survive that, and now both of them, they're back. Their defensive pairings right now, Forsling with Ekblad, Mikula with Brandon Montour, then Oliver Ekman-Larsson and Dmitry Kulikov, former Pittsburgh Penguin Dmitry Kulikov, of course, from last year. But this is going to be a true test for the Penguins, and we're going to be able to see if they can live up to that challenge tonight, that's for sure. But that will do it, I think, for this first segment. Coming up in the second segment, Pat and I are going to get into the injury situation, why things went from bad today to a little bit worse. But before we get to that, we got to tell you all about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, what brings home the winning trophy, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you'll get your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. All right, we're back here on this edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Dam. So, Penguins made a boatload of moves today, putting Noel Acciari on injured reserve. So, he's still banged up. Matt Nieto, of course, is still hurt. Brian Russ is not going to be playing in this game. He's still being evaluated. Ricard Raquel is not going to be playing in this game. The Penguins are down quite a few forwards right now. And based on the moves they made, Pat, their bottom six is going to be almost a Wilkes-Barre version of it tonight. This is an AHL bottom six. This morning, the Penguins recalled Mark Johnstone, Jonathan Gruden, and Valtteri Puustinen from Wilkes-Barre, and then Kapanen and Alex Nylander were reassigned to Wilkes-Barre. Of course, as I said, Acciari was placed on injured reserve. A good chunk of those forwards that were called up are going to be playing in this game. We'll have to see if Johnstone gets in. And honestly, I hope he does, because this is a really cool story for him. Spent 4 years in the NCAA, 2 years in the ECHL, over 2 years in the AHL with the Marlies and the Wilkes-Barre Penguins, has 2 goals, 5 points in Wilkes-Barre this season. And he's 27 right now. And this is his first call-up to an NHL squad. That's really cool. All that info comes courtesy of Josh Getzov. Shout out to him, by the way. But that's a really cool story, and I really hope he gets in. But, man, this injury situation, it took 2 months for the injury curse to take full effect with this team.
Here's the biggest thing for me. And I want to see what these three do. You know, obviously Johnstone has the mold of a guy who has been paying his dues and trying his hardest to get to the NHL. Now, we're going to find out if he just hasn't been put in the right opportunity, or if he's just a career minor leaguer, which, as I always preface, it sounds like an insult. It's not. You can make a pretty darn good living as a minor league hockey player, and it's pretty damn hard to get to the ECHL or the AHL. Maybe difficult to get the NHL, just as hard to get to the other two. But the main thing for me is Kapanen and Nylander, they didn't do anything when they were here.
No.
It's an opportunity. They're not young guys, but they are guys who are getting a shot, and they didn't do anything with it. I'm not saying that, you know, you have to score a bunch of points and light the world on fire, but show a little fight, show a little effort, get a little nasty if you have to in a game. They just didn't do anything. And these three coming up, you know, obviously I said about Johnstone, you know, finally getting a call up after all these years. Should he play? Jonathan Gruden and Valtteri Puustinen. Pustinen's put up some points before in the NHL, and Gruden's a guy who can just use some speed and work. But at the same time, that's the main thing I'm looking for out of these guys. I don't need you to be superstars, but I need you to put up an effort. I need you to act like this is your shot and you are going to take it.
Right. I'm not expecting any three of these players to be world beaters for the Penguins. I think those are unrealistic expectations, but come up here, play your tail off. Heck, throw a hit if you want to. Look engaged, because it felt like when Kapanen and Nylander were playing, and honestly, I'll throw Jansen Harkins in there too, they just weren't doing anything. And I know Harkins may play tonight too, because he wasn't sent down to Wilkes-Barre, but they just haven't been doing anything when they were getting their chances. And I want to see more from these players compared to those three. Act like this is your one big shot at the NHL. And, you know, for Puustinen, he's only played one NHL game, has 1 point in that game, had an assist during the 2021-22 season, 5 goals, 10 points in Wilkes-Barre this year. Jonathan Gruden, same, 5 goals, 10 points in Wilkes-Barre this season. Gruden, I haven't really been too impressed with him when he's played at the NHL level, but that's also really small sample size. I'm curious to see more of Puustinen because he gets talked up quite a bit down in Wilkes-Barre. Let's see how much his game has grown since his last appearance with the Penguins 2 seasons ago. Of those three, he is the one that I'm most intrigued about or fascinated about heading into tonight.
Hey, any chance you can get to call up a point per game player in the NHL, you got to take it.
Right. No, I mean, you're not.
No,
you're not wrong.
but I agree. I
Right.
agree with you. You know, we have heard about that. You know, this guy has been the white whale, so to speak, for the Penguins prospect system. That isn't a guy who they've drafted in the last couple of years. It's a guy who we hear about is he's got this offensive upside. He can score. He can produce. Well, now it's time for him to prove it. It's time for him to come up, and maybe he doesn't come up and steal a spot and keep it forever, but move yourself up the depth chart, move yourself up the system depth chart, make it so it doesn't have to be two guys getting sent down and you coming up in a group of three. Make it so when there's call-ups, you're the first guy they call.
Agreed. And apologies on this. 10 points in 18 games for Puustinen, 10 points in 21 for Gruden. Just want to get my correction in on that. But I agree with you. Overall, you're going down the depth chart here with Wilkes-Barre. Obviously, there's not too much down there. We all know that, Pat. I mean, this team isn't riddled with all this talent like some other AHL teams are, but all it takes sometimes is you find a hidden gem, and maybe Puustinen can be that guy if he gets a little bit of a shot here as more Penguin players are a bit banged up at this point. Yeah, he's going to be playing bottom 6 minutes, so we'll have to see when it comes to that. But again, I'm still excited for him for this opportunity. I'm excited for all three of these players to get this opportunity. Switching gears a little bit for tonight, looks like the top power play unit is going to be a bit different. We could see Vinny Hinostroza on that top power play unit, and maybe they're out of answers at least right now. I mean, see what you can do with him on that one, I guess. I will throw a prediction out there for you though. Stamp it. Penguins will score a power play goal tonight with Patric Hornqvist in the building. They got to do it for Hornqvist. He was the wrecking ball in front of the net, and we'll get to Hornqvist in just a second, a little bit more. They're going to score a power play goal tonight for him, and hopefully I don't get old takes exposed on that. I'm just feeling it for this long with him in the building.
Vinny Hinostroza, and I don't want this to get taken too seriously or too out of proportion because it shows you how pathetic this power play has been, but he's got to be a bit of an X factor for this power play. And just in the sense that he's got to be the guy who just gets his ass kicked. Just go to the front of the net, stand there, get the puck out to the guys who are talented and cause some havoc in front of the net. Do nothing else. I don't need you corralling the puck behind the net. I don't need you possessing it at the tops of the circles. Just plant your ass in front because I don't know what it is. I've said it on the show. I've said it on Twitter. This team at 5-on-5, they like going to the net. They do. They finish in front of the net a lot. Then as soon as the power play shows up, they're allergic to it. So be nice to see that change tonight. Be nice to see that change overall. So if there's somebody who could and should do it, make it Hinostroza.
Hey,
that sounded like an advertisement for like a drink. Make it Hinostroza.
If he scores a goal in front of the net tonight, we should honestly coin that as an advertisement for him, or maybe just a new drink or something. How about that? Let's do that, Pat.
I'll just use my Photoshop ability, my Photoshop capabilities of like the goal celebration and like find like a 90s beer poster font and just say like, make it Hinostroza.
This team still truly does need another net front presence. And speaking of that, we're going to talk about the Penguins' last net front presence in the final segment because it is Patric Hornqvist tonight on Friday night. But before we get to that, we got to tell you all about the Jace case. I know we come to sports to escape from some of the crazy realities of real life, but can we talk just for a minute about preparing for real life? According to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics right in the middle of the worst flu season in over a decade. This is scary. I can't imagine a more helpless feeling than if my girlfriend got sick while a supply chain issue kept them from the life-saving medication that they needed. Thankfully, we'll be okay because of Jace Medical. The Jace case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, skin infections, among others. This stuff could happen to any of us. Visit jacemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It will be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It's never been more important to be prepared than today. Go to jacemedical.com and use offer code LOCKEDON to get up to $20 off your first order. All right, we're back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Damp. So in the spirit of it being Patric Hornqvist tonight, I've already guaranteed that there's going to be a power play goal tonight, and they'll break this long over 34 drought that it's on its way to becoming historic. If not, it's historic already, to be honest. But Pat, what did Patric Hornqvist mean to this organization?
This is actually what I wrote about today for my weekly column at KDKA, Penguins Perspectives, just because he represented a culture shift for this organization. Because if you think back to, and I actually, Yohi wrote about it today too, and I tweeted back at him. I said, I swear I didn't know you were going to do this when I drafted my column on Thursday. But if you think back to when they traded for him, it was unpopular. It was a very unpopular move with the fan base because James Neal became everything that he was advertised to be. 30, 40 goal scorer, great with Evgeny Malkin. He scored we don't remember it because he was kind of a jerk, but scored a lot of clutch goals as a Penguin. And they tossed him out for this guy we'd never heard of, Patric Hornqvist. Drafted the same year as Sidney Crosby, but he was Mr. Irrelevant. He was the last pick of the draft. And he represented everything the Penguins were lacking. He was tenacious. He was physical. He played a really fast physical game. And he was just an all-around positive presence that this team needed. There was something in Josh's column on The Athletic today that I didn't know or forgot about that he did during his time as a Penguin. When they would be struggling or things would be going poorly and all the reporters in the locker room would gather around Crosby or Malkin, he would step in and go, no, don't worry about them. Come talk to me. Come talk to me. And it's not me saying that Crosby and Malkin need shielding. They don't. They're big boys. They've been in the league for almost 20 years. But it speaks to understanding the mood of the room and the mood of the team. And they just have not been able to replace that since he left.
You took the words right out of my mouth to end your answer, because I honestly still feel like to this day, Patric Hornqvist was the leader that they never knew they needed. You know what you're going to get from Crosby, Malkin, and Letang. Heck, even Kessel a little bit was a leader in that locker room. But when Hornqvist came in, even before Kessel obviously got traded to the Penguins, he was immediately a leader, because when those three didn't want to talk to the media, Hornqvist was like, you know what? Okay, come on over. I'll send a message to this team and we'll go from there. And usually every time he sent a message, the team responded. And you're right. The Penguins haven't been able to replace that since he got traded. Shifting to his on-ice abilities, everyone knows just how great of a net front presence he was, how he got his butt kicked in front of the net, but didn't give a damn at all. He would just stand there and be like, you know what? You can slash me. You can whack me all you want. I'm still going to stand here and I'm going to deflect every puck that comes near my stick, and I'm going to terrorize your goalie. That's just the kind of player that he was. He was the typical player that you hate him if he's not on your team, but you love him if he's on your team. I'll always keep saying he's a modern day Tomas Holmstrom, just an absolutely amazing player. And the goal that he scored for the Stanley Cup winner in Nashville, typical Patric Hornqvist goal. The Schultz shot from the point, he's right in his office, banks it in off Pecorine and in. That is the typical Hornqvist goal. And I still miss him all the time on this team. And I thought the trade at the time was fine. The contract was a lot. You were getting Mike Matheson back, who went on, I think, to play pretty well for the Penguins before he was dealt. But they still have not replaced him on or off the ice since he left.
No. And my favorite thing with him was 2016, because it's a fun fact that really doesn't mean a whole lot of anything, but it's fun. He scored the first and last goal of that run. He scored the first goal against the Rangers in the first game of the first round, and then he scored the empty netter in San Jose to seal it in Game 6. So, I mean, if there was, and you know, those two runs had moments from all the big boys, Crosby, Malkin, Letang, Gensel, but Patric Hornqvist provided so many clutch moments in those runs that it almost gets underrated what he meant to the team because, like you said, the Stanley Cup clinching goal in Nashville. If you remember, in 2016, they go up against the Rangers. That's the third straight year they're playing them.
Yes.
And that was their boogeyman. They could not beat that team in the playoffs. They were absolutely shell-shocked by them 2 years in a row. And Patric Hornqvist goes out in game one and is like, you know what? I'm just going to terrorize Henrik Lundqvist until we win, or Henrik Lundqvist quits. And they went out
right from game one, too, because he scored that goal late in the first. And yeah, Hank got a bit banged up in that game, but he still came back in the series. But even after he came back, Hornqvist was in his grill the entire 5 games
all game long.
And you could tell he was getting upset because the Rangers had no one to stop him. That was the thing. And then obviously you had the game 4 winner against the Capitals to go up 3-1. And I'll still say to this day, that series was over after that game. The Penguins, you knew they were going to win that series. And yeah, they had that crazy blown lead in game 6 before Nick Bonino did his thing in overtime. But after Hornqvist scored the OT winner, and thank you, Mike Weber, by the way, for that beautiful bounce right to Hornqvist's stick. Right when he scored that, I'm like, yeah, this is done. The Penguins have their number, and they've been bullying them all series, and it's going to continue. Right when they needed a goal in that moment, and right when I feel like they needed a spark or just anything in that run in 2017, he provided it. And man, I can't stop smiling about thinking about Hornqvist because he was such an absolute warrior for this franchise. And man, what a player, really.
And I'll finish with this. My all-time favorite story about him was the 15-16 season when it gets announced that the Penguins have traded for Carl Hagelin. And he's walking through the facility. I can't remember if it was UPMC, Lemieux, or if it was PPG at the time, or Consol at the time. And he says to somebody, I can't remember who, wait, you mean we traded for Haggy? Don't you know that's my best friend?
Yeah.
He has this big grin on his face. And that embodied him because he wasn't afraid to be just this positive energy in the locker room when you needed it. And, you know, the funniest thing about that too was in that first cup run when the Showtime show All Access came out and they were in the Tampa series. As much as he was a positive force, you could also tell how focused he was because he wins the Warrior helmet in one of the games and they literally like barely smiles, barely says anything, puts it on. He's like, that's right, boys. And you could tell that was a guy who set the tone of like, yeah, we're happy we won, but we're not done.
Absolutely. And yeah, he was definitely obviously giddy when Hagelin got traded. And that even goes back to the series before against the Rangers when they lost in 5 in 2014-15, because you saw the two have a really nice moment in the handshake line. Like they gave each other quite a long hug after Hagelin ended the Penguins season there. And I could tell right away, I'm like, okay, these guys are definitely close. And then they obviously became closer once Hagelin joined the Penguins and helped win the 2 Stanley Cups. But I think that will do it for this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. Thank you all so much for taking the time to listen to / watch this one. Pat and I will be back with another episode for you all on Monday to recap this game against the Panthers. And let's see what happens. If they win, the vibes are good. But if they lose, we could be talking about some changes on the Monday episode show. But again, thank you all so much for tuning in. Really appreciate it. We'll be back on Monday.